Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Diaz-Borges, and I'm delighted to be welcoming you to the 6th edition of the African Insurance Awards, live from the African Insurance Studio. The awards are an initiative of the Africa Reinsurance Corporation, commonly known as Africa Re. The awards are an excellent and unique occasion to recognize and acknowledge the much valued work of insurance and reinsurance companies across Africa and to celebrate excellence and best practices in the industry. The event indeed contributes to the development of the insurance industry by promoting the outstanding performances, innovations that foster the development of the African economy. This year, our 6th award ceremony, for obvious reasons and for the very first time, will be meeting virtually with viewers from all over Africa and the world. Today, we will discover the nominees and winners of the various categories of the awards, but we will also have the opportunity to hear from the most prominent economists and experts in the insurance sector in Africa. And I don't want to spoil the surprise, but some of Africa's most talented artists, not me, will also be joining us to perform live and celebrate with us. Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, before we start our program, let's take a few minutes to learn more about Africa Re, the organizers of the awards who have made all this possible.
The founding of Africa Re over 40 years ago changed the African insurance and reinsurance landscape forever. The year was 1976. The concept was simple: foster, encourage, and strengthen African insurance and reinsurance growth by developing underwriting and retention capacity. The economy of the African continent needed to be protected to reduce the flight of insurance premiums, insurance assets, and wealth from its shores. The expertise in insurance and reinsurance needed to be built. The long journey undertaken by Africa Re now realizes a shareholding structure which includes 41 African states, the African Development Bank, African insurance and reinsurance companies, and 3 non-African investors. Africa Re operates from 6 regional offices: Casablanca in Morocco, Nairobi in Kenya, Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, Eben in Mauritius, Cairo in Egypt. The 6th office is in Lagos, Nigeria, Africa Re's flagship headquarters. And the corporation's net has been cast further with 2 subsidiaries: Africa Re South Africa in Johannesburg and Africa Re Takaful in Cairo. Furthermore, the corporation has a local office in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Outside the continent, Africa Re operates in the Middle East and other parts of Asia, and also in Brazil.
Impressive work, Africa Re. I think that we all agree that insurers have a key role to play in our economies. So let's hear now from the Group Managing Director and CEO of Africa Re, Dr. Corneille Karekedzi, who is streaming from our studios in Lagos. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Karekedzi.
Honorable Ministers, Your Excellencies, member of the diplomatic community, distinguished insurance and reinsurance executives and professionals, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, you are most welcome to this 6th edition of the African Insurance Awards, an event which has become, over the years, the most prestigious platform to celebrate the best achievements in the African insurance industry. This event would have been held alongside the 47th AIO Conference and General Assembly, which was initially planned for June 2020 in Lagos, Nigeria, but unfortunately cancelled due to the raging COVID-19 pandemic. A total of 52 entries were submitted this year to the rigorous scrutiny of the panel of judges of these awards. These judges, renowned experts and captains of the industry professionally and collectively selected the winners for this year's awards. The ongoing health, financial and socioeconomic crisis has taught us in Africa, and certainly in your organizations and communities, two things. One, life must continue. Second, we must rebuild back better and together. Based on these two lessons, instead of postponing, we decided to continue with the organization of the 2020 African Insurance Awards. In this way, in addition to the various supports in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic at African continental level, through the Africa Foundation, Africa Group continues to fulfill our corporate social responsibility and reaffirm our solidarity with the African continent in these difficult times. In his book, The Plague, the French writer Albert Camus writes about plagues and wars in human history, and I quote, "Plagues and wars help women and men to rise above themselves. Similarly, we believe that the COVID-19 pandemic is a golden opportunity for the insurance industry to reposition itself, to project its relevance to risk management and its impact across the economic value chain. Based on our early reports on the state of the African insurance industry in 2020, there are many indications that most insurance companies have adapted quickly and well to the new normal and challenges. Our sincere hope is that the forthcoming recovery period will witness tremendous positive changes which will speed up the process of bridging the insurance gap in our communities and economies. While we plan for the future, it is also necessary to celebrate the achievement made in recent years. In the year 2019, there were many positive developments in our industry. Because of that, we now have more resilient companies with improved financial base. And this can be attributed to the hard work of insurance professionals across the continent. Today, we are going to recognize and celebrate some of the African insurance industry individuals and organizations that played a major role in birthing these outcomes. Once again, I will welcome you all to this virtual event. Wherever you are, please relax and enjoy the lively discussions and educative sessions. We have indeed lined up for the panel presentations and discussions some of the best minds we know to discuss and interact with you on the current situation, perspectives, and outlook for our businesses and industry. Of course, as the pinnacle of today's event, our winners in the different categories will be unveiled thereafter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kerekedzi, for your warm and encouraging words. Indeed, life must continue, and together we'll build back better. Now, before we discover the nominees and the winner of the first category, we would like to give a very special thanks to our highly distinguished panel of judges who have spent numerous hours to help us shortlist and select this year's winners. Each one of them has considerable knowledge and experience, and we are very grateful for the time, effort, and dedication. Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, our first recognition today will be an award to an insurance company that excels in the use of technology, launching a breakthrough product, services, and a new and innovative distribution channel. Our winner has fully engaged customers to enhance their end-to-end insurance journey. Let's discover the nominees of the Innovation of the Year Award. Congratulations, bravo to our nominees, AAR Insurance Kenya, Alpha Direct Insurance Company, Custodian Investment PLC, and Kenbright Insurance Brokers Limited. I know that you are now very impatient to know the winner, so let's go. Congratulations, Alpha Direct Insurance Company from Botswana. Let's hear a few words from their CEO, Mr. Arun Lear.
Good day, everyone. On behalf of the entire team at Alpha Direct Botswana, I am delighted to accept the African Insurance Award for Innovation of the Year 2020. This year has been fraught with immense challenges, not only for the insurance industry, but for all manners of commerce around the world. In the depths of the challenges we face, innovation has proven to be the beacon of hope that leads the path to our vision of financial inclusion and the elimination of poverty across our continent. The instant insurance in a box concept developed by our team has proven that using African ingenuity and programming talent, we can truly create first in the world innovations that could allow for every single African to have access to digital insurance solutions in a way that addresses the key challenges facing financial inclusion, namely cost, complexity, and accessibility. Tangible insurance sold through traditional retail distribution allows for the average consumer to benefit from affordable insurance where they live, with a 60-second sign-up process that does not require them to have access to the internet or any other technology. We have seen this revolution insure tens of thousands of previously uninsured people in our home country of Botswana within a matter of months since our initial launch. And we believe that the same success will push the further inclusion that we envision across the continent. Thank you to all my dedicated team members that built, operated, and grew something that began as a vision into the reality that it is today. And thank you to Africa Re for the recognition of the immense potential of our unique innovation. Together, I hope innovations such as ours will help us all realize the dream of a truly prosperous continent when no African is left behind. I humbly thank you once again for all the support and recognition. Wishing you a Merry Christmas, a wonderful year ahead, and a prosperous and innovative 2021.
Congratulations again, wonderful. Now I'm going to take you on a little trip to our dear Ethiopia. So fasten your seat belts and enjoy the magical voice of Betty G, a rising star on the Ethiopian music scene.
ፈገግታዬ አንተን ሳገኝ ነው ሆኖ ቢልማዴ በደስታ መደሰት ደግሞ አንተን ሳጣ ዝምታ መሸመት አንተም ብቻ ይላል የሚያውቀው የለምና ተዋት አስጨንቀኝ ሳስብ ቶሎና እኔም አንረበሽ አይብዛ ናፍቆቴ መኖርህን ሳቀው የሚሞቀው ቤቴ
You know that Africa is a cradle of all mankind. We have to offer so much to the world in terms of music, art, business, culture. Thank you to the organizers for all the work you're doing in celebrating those people and institutions playing an important role in transforming Africa and, more importantly, the prospect of all our people.
Thank you, Betty G. Beautiful song. I've always been fascinated by the Habesha dance. Next, we have our first of two panel discussions. As you all know, the current COVID-19 pandemic has shed a light on the need for the African insurance sector to demonstrate its critical role to supporting people and businesses. The pandemic has been the most severe global event in a century, and Africa has not come out of it unscathed. What does it mean for the insurance sector? What next? What's the outlook? And how are things fundamentally changing? Our first panel discussion, New World of Insurance Priority and Changes, will address that. So let me welcome Mr. Richard Lowe, who's the founder and executive chairman of the Activa Insurance Group. Mr. Lowe is joining us from Douala in Cameroon. We are also in the company of Mr. Haman Badir, Chairman and Managing Director of Iscan Insurance Company based in Cairo, Egypt. We also have Dr. Patrick Tumbo, who is the Group Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director at Sanlam Kenya PLC, and Dr. You are in Nairobi, Kenya. And finally, Mr. Dominic Christian, Global Chairman of Reinsurance Solution at Aon PLC, who is joining us from London. Mr. Bader, I'd like to start with you. In light of this pandemic, how has COVID affected your activities, and how have you adapted to the constraints in order to bring support to not only your clients, but also your staff?
Certainly at the beginning it was difficult in all frontiers. Either it is communicating with the team, particularly when we have been working from home. That is a culture that it is definitely new to everyone to work from home, and for the management to make sure that employees are actually working from home and they are doing what they are supposed to do. Since they have been always monitoring it from 9 to 5, so we are still in the process of determining certain rules and quantum, how can we quantify the work of each and every employee. For certain classes of business, even if we go to the business, personal lines, buying motor insurance policy, yes, it is straightforward and we can judge how productive the employee is. But when it comes to other types of insurance covers, when we are insuring a property, depends, either it is a big building or it's a factory, so the underwriting process requires much longer time. So to this moment, we haven't really reached a definitive measures in order to enable us to really to judge and make sure that the employee working from home is putting the right time and productivity, it is within the expected or accepted level. So we have to work on that more and more in order to come with the defined measures to really to ascertain the productivity of each and everyone in the team.
How about you, Mr. Lowe? How have you been impacted and how have you managed to adapt to this new normal?
As we were all obliged to do, I think that the first priority for us was the health of the staff. So we start by made some investment just to to make care of the fact that the staff should be safe and don't be concerned by this COVID. All these measures of the temperature at the door of the office, giving the mask to all the staff, have all these alcoholic on all the tables. The first investment we made for us and for our client also. And also, we were obliged to introduce some flex at work, just trying to avoid the fact that all the staff must be in the office at the same time. We try to put in place some system, knowing that half of the staff this week could work from home, the other half could work from the office, and this from week to week. This was the way we have tried to put in place to adapt the new organization. Now, concerning the customers who are the kings, we need to, of course, to be always present with them. Since it was not possible to continue to have this contact with the client, we need to be able to adapt on the new context, knowing that we must continue to be in touch with our client without any physical contact. That's why we improve our digital system to give to the client the opportunity to join us very, very easily. And this, I think that on the digital system, we made a big jump because of this COVID. Now we can have the client all the day long by video at any time. So the contact will be more often than yes. And I think that for the future, I do believe this is why we are just facing the future with very, very positive attitude, because I'm sure that in the future, the client will feel more safe by us.
Thank you very much. Mr. Christian, we've heard Mr. Lowe talk about adaptation, which is a big part of what you do. Your industry indeed needs to keep on adapting. It also has to deal with shocks, whether these are environmental or events like 9/11. But is COVID-19 a different kind of shock? And how has it affected not only your activities, but your industry as a whole?
I agree with Mr. Lowe that one of the ways it is very different is that every organization in the world has been impacted in some way. And with 9/11 or the World Trade Center, where there was a massive industry shock, of course, the trade tragedies, and with the liability crisis that existed in the 1980s, with the big hurricanes in 2005, with all of these subjects, and then the global financial crisis in 2008-9, in our business, either the asset side of the balance sheet was impacted, or the liability side. We either had insurance claims, or we had capital losses, or investment losses. But in fact, in this occasion, both sides have been impacted. So insurance companies throughout the world have had to reassess and rethink at various points their investment policies, because their assets have been at one stage depleted, many have recovered. And then, of course, most importantly, as again Mr. Lowe is saying, we've had to think about our clients and how do we serve them best. At the same time, you've been having to wrap that in with, most importantly, how you look after your colleagues. So for us, it's every single feature of company life has been impacted by this activity. And to my mind, this difference will be, or this, and you're right, we are the first responders. Insurance and insurance people are the first responders in crisis, financial crisis, for individuals, for communities, for businesses. And as first responders, we have to be very resilient. We have to be very resilient mentally. Our processes have to be very resilient. The way in which we talk to clients has to be very resilient. And the most important thing we need to do is continue to provide certainty for clients. So that has been, I think, our challenge. Because in some parts of the world, as you know, there's been litigation around claims. In some parts of the world, the insurance brand has suffered. In many parts of the world, actually, it is advanced. And so we have to look very carefully and learn a great deal from this experience. And for me, the learning from this experience is far greater than anything else I have seen in my career that's affected the insurance industry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christian. Dr. Tumbo, as far as the financial year goes, what have you noticed with your activities?
Yeah, what I've noticed with the activities, given the first question you had asked, whether the loss that we sustained in the first quarter was really as a result of COVID, I could say it's not purely as a result of COVID. One, you could find that especially the second quarter, starting from March, coming down when there was that panic, people withheld their premiums, people were not buying insurance. Everybody panicked a little bit. So we could make a lot of provisions. And these provisions, to some level, affected our profitability. At the same time, you find earnings in the first quarter were not significant. So given those little earnings, then it was possible, or it became obvious that being prudent, not to over-release the reserves, we reported a modest loss. But as I mentioned, in the second half, things have turned and everything seems to be very okay. Really, the first quarter, there was that panic, and we were thinking there will be a lot of cash flow moving out. There will be a lot of losses to be sustained, but those reserves, those provisions that we were thinking about did not come through. So at least we see better results in the second half and third quarter. And as we go to the end of the year, things are looking north.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tumbo. Mr. Bader, I want to ask you, can you tell us a little bit more about the initiatives that Ascan Insurance Company has championed to support financial inclusion, for instance?
This is the theme that is even promoted by the insurance commissioner, and financial inclusion. It is an area where, yes, insurance companies has to play a role leading, knowing that they provide the protection for the economy at large. So all the the insurance products and the services that is provided, it is aiming actually to really to achieve that financial inclusion. It may take much longer time, but I think with the technology that is now available to the insurance industry and the insurance companies, they can implement and reach out to their clients at all levels, either it is individuals or corporate. More of a proper communication will definitely lead to achieving that goal.
Thank you very much. Mr. Christian, I'd like to ask you, what is your take on this? And according to you, how can technology support financial inclusion?
I think in a number of ways. The first point is to you seek to understand what we need to do as a business. What we like to do all of this every day in insurance is understand risk and understand individuals' risks. In that connection, we need to know more about our clients, know more about their concerns and their issues. And it's not so much technology, but it's the use of data that allows us to do that. And the more we know about you, the more we know about your business, the more we know about your community, the more we can help. But to do that, we need data. And we need to aggregate this data. We need to use this data. We need to understand this data. And having done that, we can then provide products to you, to communities, to those that are perhaps more vulnerable, to your point, those that actually we need to reach most in a very effective way. There's a number of ways in which insurance, by the way, is playing a very significant role in the global fight, the pandemic. So one example would be that, at the moment, for instance, as you know, we have the first vaccines have been issued in the UK, but they have to be transported. So the transportation of the vaccine is being insured. So we are doing there's lots of ways in which we are actually locally, as the gentlemen were all describing very eloquently, how they are including and helping those that are finding life more difficult sometimes and bringing a more understood, greater understanding to insurance. But also there's also the actual real work we're doing to try in our way to help solve this crisis.
You've touched on something incredibly important, the use of data. And of course, with this increase of digitalization throughout the world, but especially in Africa, is there also a pitfall? I want to ask you, Mr. Lowe. So far, we've talked about the beautiful things about technology, but when we talk about the use of data, especially in Africa, with the sharing of information, etc., is there also a pitfall?
And when you are talking about the data, you have to face the problem of the security, of course, of the security of this data. I know that the cloud actually is the most used solution to stock all this data. And but the problem of the security, when you are talking about digitalization, you must at the same time think about the problem of the security. Mm-hmm. This is why one of the problems we have to, to face is, even if we already are able to sell cyber risk insurance, but we must know that in the future, the cyber risk will be, higher because more and more companies will use that installation. Mm-hmm. That the risk will be, a little bit tough. We insurers, we must be able to face this, and the data is maybe the better way to do it. Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. I actually want to share something with you. I recently spoke with Albert Zufak, who I'm very sure that you are familiar with. He's chief economist at the World Bank, and he told me that when it comes to digitalization in Africa, it's not a luxury, but a necessity. So looking ahead at 2021, where do you see the major drivers of growth and profitability? And I would like to start with you first, Dr. Tumbo.
Health insurance will be one of the big winners in the future, in the sense that everybody now needs, one way or the other, some sort of health insurance. We have in the UK, you have the National Hospital. In Africa, we have also the National Hospital Insurance Funds. But you will find that this is trying to have universal health care. This universal health care will be providing minimum. Then there will be the opportunity to give additional cover. Now, for us insurers, we come up and see what is it that the government can provide and what else can we add on top of that universal health care. Because right now, diseases like cancer, heart disease, lifestyle diseases, diabetes, blood pressure, and all these are actually multiplying given our lifestyle, what we eat, and the sedentary way of working, whereby you find that from morning to evening, we are still on our desks, little exercise. So we have got many lifestyles coming in. So insurance, we are thinking of how do we have insurance that will encourage people to live a healthy life on the diety. If you have a life policy, you belong to a gym, you get subsidies. Instead of you paying a higher premium, you get a discount because you will be exercising and your cardio improves. Are you seeing? Then we are looking at people going to social clubs, people playing golf. Then we will be trying to see that we provide many, many products that can be available.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bader, what is your take on this, and what does the future hold, according to you, for the world of insurance?
World of insurance in Africa or at large in the whole world?
Let's
of course, there are.
We can do both, but let's start
fine. In Africa, yes, there is big opportunities to insurance companies to spread or to provide more services to their client. Maybe I must really stress the fact here that most of the African economy on the individual level, the individual income is limited, and facing the risks that is really becoming more and more apparent, and the individuals they need to really to take care of that and provide or to buy the protection that is needed. This would really take a major part of their income, bearing in mind and the average income for the household in Africa, apart from certain countries, still within the range or limit of meeting their essentials. So the insurance remains a luxury to many communities or to many countries that requires the interference, possibly on the level of the state, to subsidize or to support the medical insurance, apart from the universal coverage that is provided. But at the same time, the awareness of the individual of the importance of insurance and to secure their future, it is getting more and more. And this is again the challenge with the colleagues mentioning the data. Certainly, the data it is required in order to price the different insurance products at the right level, and that will not be achieved unless we have sufficient data that is reflecting either the experience of a specific market or the expectation of the risk level if we apply such covers. So we are at the beginning of building up the data that is needed to improve the insurance industry in our continent, and to reach the level of the sophistication and reaching the customer the way we see it in Europe and in America and Southeast Asia and many of the more developed countries.
Thank you very much. Mr. Christian, in terms of data protection, do you have any recommendations based on what you've seen in Europe and elsewhere for Africa?
Yeah, I mean, responsible companies have to be extremely careful with this subject. It is one that is also requires a very, very close relationship with the regulator. And at least in the UK, and I can speak to other countries if you wish, but in the UK, a lot of the good work around making us more aware of data privacy, data and so forth, data training for our employees, and so forth has been generated by some very good work from the UK regulator.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. And finally, Mr. Law, I think it's quite fitting that I ask you to conclude this discussion. What do you think is awaiting the growth in Africa and the world of insurance more specifically?
Yes, thank you, Anne-Marie. Yes, as I was saying, we are looking with very, very positive outlook the year to come, the post-COVID, as we said, even if personally I think that we will live with this COVID maybe for the next 2 or 3 years. But starting by next year, for instance, in our group, we have projected a target of growth of 15% for 2021. And this COVID maybe will enlighten to our customer the need to be well covered. And it is our duty, we insurers, to be able to design products which could cover all these new risks. We should be able to have health products with the COVID cover. But in the future, I think that in Africa also, we are able, we insurers, to design products like this. As Aman has just said, the market is very sophisticated, and we are able to provide product to cover all these new needs. So this is the main reason why I'm facing the future with a very, very positive excitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you for taking the time to sharing with us today your knowledge, wisdom, and experience. Thank you very much. And next, we move on to our second award, the Insurance Company of the Year. This award will be given to a company that has demonstrated a high commitment to meet customer needs, delivering high-quality service across all its activities. This category also focuses on a clearly demonstrated level of excellence, strong performance, and standards. So without further ado, let's discover the nominees of the Insurance Company of the Year. Congratulations, Absa Life Assurance Kenya Limited, Egyptian Life Takaful Company, MUA Limited, NEM Insurance PLC, and La Royale Marocaine d'Assurance, RMA. And now, time to know who has won this award this year. Wonderful, congratulations, MUA Limited from Mauritius. Let's hear from Monsieur Bertrand Casteret, CEO of MUA Limited.
Au nom de MUA, je vous dis un grand merci de nous faire l'honneur de cette distinction aujourd'hui. Devenir la compagnie d'assurance de l'année n'aurait pas été possible sans la contribution inconditionnelle de chaque membre de la grande famille MUA, réunie dans 6 pays aujourd'hui. Depuis 2014, nous avons la vision de positionner MUA comme un acteur régional, innovant et dynamique, avec une présence accentuée en Afrique de l'Est. Nous avons confiance dans le marché africain, qui est pour nous très prometteur, et vous le noterez d'ailleurs par la dernière acquisition que MUA a fait de Saham Kenya. Our special thanks to the panelists for their votes of confidence in MUA, and to Africa Re for initiating these awards that do so much to develop the crucial insurance sector.
Wonderful, fantastique, bravo à toute l'équipe de MUA Limited, bravo. I'd like to thank again Africa Re for allowing us to celebrate with you all today. But I'd also love to learn more about their positioning, products and services. And for this, we have Mr. Ken Agogovia, who is the Deputy Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer at Africa Re. Mr. Agogovia, please tell us more.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today as we set out to recognize distinctions in Africa. I would like to start by congratulating the awardees, as well as the nominees who, in my opinion, are all winners. This year will go down in history as a unique one, in view of the massive global restrictions brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. We are now witnessing the creative solutions that have been deployed to address the challenges posed by the lockdowns. The African Reinsurance Corporation, through this annual awards ceremony, continues to celebrate individuals, organizations, products and services that stand out in the continent's insurance landscape. As the leading Pan-African reinsurer, Africa Re's uniqueness flows from a combination of factors, including its presence as a local reinsurer in Africa, operating through a network of strategically located offices across the continent and offering bespoke reinsurance solutions in all classes of business. Its shareholding structure, whereby the corporation is jointly owned by member states of the African Union and some private entities. Its mandate to support African economic development, which is being fulfilled through various initiatives across the continent. A strong corporate governance framework that ensures best practices in the corporation. Its highly ethical and skilled workforce, comprising diverse professionals from 26 different nationalities with unparalleled market knowledge, and its A-grade international credit ratings, indicative of a strong balance sheet. With over 40 years experience and strong global partnerships, Africa Re is well positioned to continue providing the much needed security to mitigate the impact of known and emerging risks on businesses and economies. I would therefore urge you to visit its website to learn more about Africa Re, your local reinsurer with international standards. Please enjoy the rest of the evening, and thank you once again for being our loyal partner.
Thank you, Mr. Agogovia. Merci beaucoup. I think that we should all commend Africa Re for all their work and for their commitment to the insurance industry. Which brings me to the third award, InsurTech. It is the first of its kind startup competition aimed at identifying the most promising innovations for the evolving insurance and reinsurance sector. It presents a fantastic opportunity for early-stage entrepreneurs to gain international exposure and to connect them with potential investors and key industry leaders. So let's discover this year's nominees. Well done, bravo, Swift Ant, Pula, WasInsure and Digitech Group Africa Limited. All your efforts are paying off. But who's the winner this year? Let's all congratulate Pula from Kenya and hear from their co-founder and CEO, Mr. Thomas Njeru.
Hi everyone, I'm Thomas Njeru, co-founder and co-CEO of Pula. At Pula, we are deeply honored and grateful to have been chosen as the recipient of the InsurTech of the Year Award 2020. This award is a testimony to the significance of Pula's mission of protecting smallholder farmers in Africa, and of course a testimony of the strides that we've made towards providing insurance to those who've never been insured before. I sincerely would like to appreciate the Pula team who have made this possible through their hard work and dedication to the movement. Many thanks to our partners, clients, sponsors and organizers of this award, and of course the 3.5 million farmers across the continent who have chosen to work with us in the journey thus far. Looking ahead, we are enthusiastic to protecting and giving dignity to the hundreds of millions of smallholder farmers on the continent for a more food secure Africa. Thank you very much.
Toutes mes félicitations. Congratulations, Mr. Njeru. Your work in supporting smallholder farmers in Africa is indeed critical to food security. The pandemic has had a significant impact on the work of smallholder farmers, and providing them with the tools to build resilience will help strengthen local value chains. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, from Nairobi to Lagos, do you care for a stopover in Nigeria? I'm loving how Africa Re are making us travel today. So let me take you to Lagos for some Afrobeat. We are so proud of our continent's wonderful talents. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you from the shrine in Lagos, the inimitable Femi Kuti.
We must remember we are brothers and sisters. Africa for Africa. And our countries are colonial structures. Africa for Africa. Border lines to keep us forever separated. Africa for Africa. As Africans we must love Africa. Africa for Africa. As Africans we must care for Africa. Africa for Africa. Africa for Africa is the way I say. Africa for Africa. Africa for Africa is the way I say. Africa for Africa. Hey, 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 Africa for Africa. Hey, 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 hey. Africa for Africa. We must remember we are brothers and sisters. Africa for Africa. War and conflicts will only bring suffering and hunger. Africa for Africa. African leaders must bring us together. Africa for Africa. As Africans, we must love Africa. Africa for Africa. As Africans, we must care for Africa. Africa for Africa. Africa for Africa is the way I say. Africa for Africa. Africa for Africa is the way I say. Africa for Africa. Africa for Africa.
Well done to all the winners. It's important we celebrate the great stories that are happening on the continent. It's only when we believe in ourselves will we emancipate ourselves economically.
Thank you, Femi Echepupo, for this great performance. Africa for Africa is actually one of my favorite songs, and you had me dancing. Thank you for your warm words. And yes, Femi, we Africans must unite to build back better. So what way forward? Our second panel will try and answer some of these questions. What's the outlook for the year ahead? And also, what role can the insurance sector play? I'm delighted to have with us today Dr. Carlos Lopez, professor at the Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. Mr. Lopez is also former executive secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And also Mr. Ludovic Subran, chief economist at Alliance SE, Europe's leading insurer and investor. Welcome to you both. I would like to start with you, Mr. Subran. 2020, what a year. It's almost coming to an end, but it will forever remain in history because, of course, of the unprecedented pandemic, COVID-19. Mr. Subran, can you first of all make an assessment for us? How has this pandemic affected global economy? What's the situation today?
Well, the situation is that we are startled, I guess. We are still under the PTSD of what happens once in a century, which is a global pandemic. We're still discovering about the virus. We're battling with science. I guess the good news for us economists is that now if you have 5 epidemiologists in one room, you know that there are 6 opinions, which is something that was supposed to be, only for economists or rabbis or priests or something. So it's very complicated to see how 2021 will shape. What I can tell you, what is my key learnings from 2020 as an insurer, is that systemic, probabilistic, exponential risk do exist and do matter, and we need to find solutions to insure them. And I think that reminds me of climate change. Climate change has been on the back burner, and something like this actually reminds us that we need to be better at adapting, preventing the negative consequences of the next crisis. And maybe, it can be a cyber attack, it can be climate change, but we need to do that. Second, as an economist, I've seen the crisis unfold, at the heart of the engines. I've seen policymakers being completely bewildered. And what I see now, at least my key learning, is that we don't really know what is private and what is public anymore. We know that governments played a major role because they ensured that health was somehow a global public good, but we could have done much better, especially when you look at how we managed in a very protectionist way the access to masks and today the access to vaccine. But in monetary and fiscal policy, we went beyond and above, and I think this is fascinating. A year ago, the debate we would have with economists would be, it's the spare tire policy. There is no room to maneuver. Monetary policy, central banks have done too much. There is no money for governments, and now it's like, ooh, it's Las Vegas. Every day, governments announce billions and billions. And the third key learning for me, which is very important for 2021, is we're going to need to find a way for the vaccine to help convergence again. So the 2020 was very Darwinian. So we had, good countries, bad countries in terms of, health situation, economic situation, crises. I hope the vaccine is going to be, helping us to reduce the new inequalities formed by COVID-19. I'm not sure it will, but I think this should be on the multilateral front. It should be one of the major policy goals to try to make sure that we recouple somehow. And this is going to be particularly important for the African continent, where 2021 could be without China, without strong commodity prices, and without tourism, three major external engines for Africa. So we need to continue to avoid policy mistakes, and we need to continue to work hard to make sure young people don't bear the brunt and the scarring effects of this crisis, that companies stay afloat and grow back and restart the engines. So there is still a lot to do to make sure that we build back better from this pandemic.
Mr. Subran, looking at your sector in particular, the insurance sector, how has it been affected?
Well, I mean, there was a wake-up call for the insurance sector because of what I just said. We had, to see, head first what it is to have one of these major threats coming to realization, with the idea of how do we work with governments in these cases? How do we work with reinsurers? How do we transfer the risk to the market? How do we make sure we pay out very quickly so that people can build back better, and we can, the private sector is much stronger at doing that sometimes than the public sector. This time, the public sector jumped at it, including on health insurance, for example. If you look into 2021, it looks like vaccine and access to vaccine is going to be considered as a public main, and I think it's very good. But in the future, we're going to have to think a little bit about health insurance and what could be the new trends in health insurance, looking at what happened right now, and especially what type of preventative measures could be reimbursed. So insurers have been affected in their investment income. Insurers manage a lot of assets, so they've lost some of the they've been affected by the volatility on the financial markets. It's also a moment when we saw new habits, new usages emerge. People took their car less. They asked for new insurance on demand. There's been a massive acceleration of digital behaviors. So for us, when you think about the way we distribute products, the way we calibrate them, it is a bit of there will be a before and an after COVID-19. And so, I think 2021, if nominal growth, picks up, gross written premium, which is, basically our top line, should come back to growth, especially in Asia, but also in Europe and in the US. The question now is to see, how we handle the new customer needs, and can we meet this demand, because there will be many of them, and how do we need to tweak some of our products and solutions and services to make sure that we are relevant in a post-COVID-19 era. So there is a lot of talks about that in the insurance sector, and I think this is also happening in many other sectors, financial, non-financial services, and of course, just think about the healthcare sector, just think about manufacturing, agriculture. Everybody has been somehow, nudged by this crisis, and has to rethink some of what we thought was, something we could continue to do for quite some time without to radically adjust.
Thank you very much. And I believe that we'll have time to come back to the day after, indeed, to what's in the pipeline in a few minutes. But Mr. Lopez, I'm very interested to have your take on this. What's your assessment when it comes to global economy? Do you agree with Mr. Subran? And what is the situation when it comes to African economies in particular?
Well, taking the cue from Ludovic, I wanted to concentrate on risk. After all, from the sanitary point of view, we never had anything as deep and profound in terms of systemic impact as this pandemic. But we all remember the Spanish flu. So it is normal that with that distance in historical terms between the Spanish flu and what we are facing with COVID, most people have just forgotten that we could enter into such a deep impact caused by a pandemic. And if we look into the economic side, we never had a situation like this since the Great Depression. And again, we have forgotten about it because even the 2008-2009 crisis that is very close to us, or Ebola crisis, which is very close to African countries, you had sort of a small highlight of what could be the impact that we are facing now. What I believe has come out of this lesson is a new notion of risk. We used to have low probability would consequently be measured as low risk, whereas now low probability is very high risk. And that changes completely the way we look into how we are going to build a new world that takes into account this amazing learning that has been provoked by COVID. And that's why we can say it's really quite unprecedented. We look into the three mega trends: demographics, climate change, and technological developments, and each one of them points into a convergence of policy debates that are going to oblige us to do things differently. We can no longer ignore the fact that there is an aging of the population that has affected some countries more than others in terms of the impact of this pandemic. We can no longer ignore that climate change is responsible somehow for indirectly the way we have been dealing with energy transitions, and the environment has been affected in such a way that, you know, mutations are now much more possible than before in terms of the pandemic, but also that we can no longer continue to be prepared to face this type of adversity with the characteristics that we have built in our economies. And finally, on the technological side, Ludovic was just mentioning how we have digitalized so much just as a consequence of the learning from the fact that right now we can have disruptions that come very fast in terms of our mobility, in terms of our value chains, and also in terms of our supply chains. So the entire world of logistics is upside down, and we have to reconsider how we are going to deal with it. And that's why all the enterprises that are in the logistics side are making a lot of money. It's like casino for them, because, you know, everybody is sort of in a panic mode insofar as logistics is concerned. So all of these elements point in one direction, and the direction is that we thought we had one world that, you know, was running more or less okay until January this year. And then all of a sudden we discovered, just with this disruption, that there were a lot of systemic problems. They are not new. They were in the agenda for quite some time, but the way we look at them is completely different since COVID.
It's very interesting what you just said, actually. I notice in my line of work that a lot of people say that COVID-19 has forced Africa to turn inwards. It's highlighted also its shortcomings, and the continent has had to reassess its position on the value chains. So, Mr. Lopez, I want to ask you, according to you, is recovery possible? Can you also be specific on which sectors might recover the fastest and why?
Well, you see, the forecast of the IMF in January this year was for 21 countries in Africa to grow at 5% or more. That was quite spectacular. We are going to have a very impressive performance, probably the best performance in regional terms when comparable with, you know, both historical data and also what was going to be the performance in other regions of the world, probably only surpassed by Southeast Asia. Now, we saw that the fragility of that growth was such that with the disruption that obviously has affected lots of economies, not just the African economies, we could just shift the discussion completely into how we are going to pay debt. Debt servicing is going to become prohibitive. We can no longer afford to respond to the needs in socioeconomic terms, but also in health terms of this pandemic. And all of that is a result of a very small fiscal space. So the moment there is something, the African countries are completely boxed. They don't have a lot of options. They can't use monetary policy like the big and rich countries can, because they can just print money. They can do stimulus packages. They can do all kinds of things that are absolutely prohibitive for the Africans to do because they will be penalized by the rating agencies and by the markets, because most of their economies are based on externalities rather than domestic dimensions, even though the domestic dimensions are responsible for most of the growth. So how are we going now to shift that type of economic structure into something that is a more resilient and is capable of actually taking the lessons of this crisis? I think we are going to do it by actually a lot of innovation. Let's see how the Africans are conceiving their immediate future. And we are going to have a very difficult 2021. One is by accelerating the free trade area that we are putting in place for the whole continent. That is going to create regional value chains and protect us from the difficulties I was mentioning, be it logistical, be it protectionism that is hidden in non-tariff barriers and other types of behaviors, and also creating opportunities for market expansion for small and medium enterprises that actually are quite active cross-border trade, but they do it informally or without the structures that should enhance their business. The second thing that is going to happen in 2021 is much more attention given to how we invest. And I think there is a lot of money that is parked right now, because there are the possibilities of profiting from investment are quite dull. You will have to wait for something to happen. It can be the vaccine, can be anything that will go into a direction of an upturn. But when the upturn will take place, there will be really a dearth of possibilities to have good bucks from your investments. And Africa will offer very good opportunities, because finally the discussion about energy transition makes Africa very appetizing. This discussion about hydrogen, Africa has the best potential for it. And all these investments on green deals, etc., will look into opportunities for leapfrogging in regions where it will be cheaper to invest than the ones that require retrofitting. So Africa can take advantage of the dimensions that are related to basically the green transitions and the climate transitions. And finally, I think the third big lessons that Africans can take advantage of is that, after all, they need to look more internally. All of a sudden, they discover that they have pension funds, and that the pension funds has a lot of money that is not productively invested. Maybe that money is more important than trying to get some more development aid. Maybe we need to look into how we are going to handle taxes and the taxation, because all of a sudden they discover that the tax pressure is very low in Africa, in countries like Nigeria and others, below 10%. That is a scandal. So there is a huge possibility of recovering using better taxation without necessarily affecting the poor. And finally, all of a sudden, people also realize that it is possible to have, in some of the predictions that were quite gloomy for Africa, something quite strange happening, like remittances were supposed to be down by 20%, according to the World Bank. Well, then they revised it to 8%. And then finally, most likely we are going to have more remittances, even though there is a crisis. And why is this important? Because remittances are much more than what we get from investments or what we get from development aid. So all of these factors point in the direction of some innovation. It doesn't mean we are going to have an easy 2021, but it means that it's going to be slightly more resilient than before. And probably, if we do things well, it's going to create the good conditions for later than 2021.
Thank you very much for this, Mr. Lopez, and for highlighting the importance of remittances. I am from Cabo Verde, as you know, and remittances are so important for the island's economy. They represent about 10% of our GDP, so thank you very much. Mr. Subran, I saw you reacting quite strongly to what Mr. Lopez has just said. Do you agree with him? He mentioned innovations. A little bit earlier, you were talking about new habits. New habits bring on new opportunities. So looking ahead, can you see a recovery in 2021 and beyond?
I think there is an important point is, everybody is rediscovering industrial policy, innovation policy, even education and housing policies. The bulk of the action in 2020 was on fiscal and monetary, but what really matters is technical line ministries and how they can actually restart some sectors. There is very good financing. There is, certainly a vision. So it's time for moonshots for everybody. Europe at least is taking that very seriously. And so that would be very important for Africa and for African countries, because of course, we mentioned the continent as one, but every country has its own, competitive advantage is efficient specialization. But for open countries in Africa, this is the moment to really gain market shares. China today has a massive edge. Global imports from China went from representing 17% to representing 26%. So China being first in, first out has actually been, gaining market shares. And so I think this is very important that some of the open economies in very trade-oriented economies in the continent actually go the extra mile to regain, because there's going to be a massive trade rebound in goods, and it's already happening, and it's much faster than after the 2008-2009 crisis, because there is no credit crunch. So exports, manufacturing, everybody has been talking about that. Africa needs to have its own tire factory. There is a need to look at South Africa for a very long time. This bimodal economy. You have commodities, you have services, you have nothing in the middle. The impact it has on jobs, especially job for the youth or absence thereof, is massive. So everybody is rediscovering downstream agro-food processing, equipment goods for manufacturing, equipment goods for households. And so I would really like to see ambitious plans for Africa, because financing conditions are going to be good, and because I do believe that there is a catchment area, a domestic market for those products in Africa, but also I believe that Africa can offer a lot to the rest of the world in terms of industrial and manufacturing, and the world is looking for alternative. Carlos mentioned this logistics reshuffle that is happening. I believe some countries in Africa, like Morocco, has understood it very quickly, very early, and that has this vision to build these ecosystems along pharma, automotive, aeronautics. So other countries can do it in Africa. I think that the energy sector is going through an important pivot. The problem for the energy sector today is indeed trying to make sure that the benefits of the sectors are for the masses and not for the classes, And Carlos mentioned something that I think everybody would agree with. Africa, for its own financing, is much too dependent on the rest of the world. The average share of domestic revenues, from taxes and so forth, in the functioning of African budget is too small. It's, on average less than 20%, when it's 46% for the Netherlands, for example. So this dependency is going to be an issue, because making choices is going to be very important in 2021. So regaining this form of independence is to leapfrog properly and to make sure that you can, restart or rebound faster in some countries is very important. So I'm looking for those green shoots, and I think that the East Africa companies have shown it in the past with agriculture products and cash crops. I'm very worried that inaction, or the lack of action, or waiting too long on the IMF to finally do an extension, or waiting too long on external creditors, is going to put a bit of a lag on the recovery of some of these economies. Again, agriculture, if we don't continue to invest massively in agriculture budget in some of these countries to make sure that the green revolution does happen, because we spend it on healthcare, we spend it on debt arrears, we spend it on whatever, we're missing the point. Because this crisis has shown that dependencies, accepting vulnerabilities, is something of the past. There is no stress test for supply chains. We should, maybe more than for banks, because this is where we saw the major bottlenecks, of course, in health equipments, but we saw that the world could actually go into a pause, and that could actually mean some shortages. And so I believe that there is a moment, a window of opportunity to rethinking this type of dependencies, and clearly the free trade agreement is one. One last point that I often think, when I think about 2021, it's very important that policymakers, especially African policymakers, but also companies, business diplomacy is going to be very important in 2021 because everybody has been looking at their own little corner. I just give you an idea, recently I looked into this tax border adjustment, this carbon tax border adjustment that Europe is trying to put in place. This could actually be very costly for African exports to Europe. So there needs to be, because we just get out of 4 years of President Trump, right? So the world is not used to thinking as one anymore. But I think it's very important that the voice of emerging countries is heard again. It's been on the back burner for very long. But when it comes to climate, for example, great, the US, the biggest polluter, is coming back to the Paris Accord, amazing. But you were out for 4 years. So now let's make sure you don't impose your own rules. Let's make sure we agree on standards together so that everybody can benefit. Because if we start putting, pseudo protectionism on, or taxing imports into some areas, because of green, we may run into issues when it comes to recoupling after this crisis. So I also encourage very strongly the African Union, of course, but also, delegates, policymakers, to make sure that their voice is heard. The first phase of 2020, we heard a lot about the North deciding to cancel some of the debt to the South. I was flabbergasted by the discussion. I thought, okay, thank you very much for the kind gesture. We're not, we don't care. We want growth. We want good financing of growth. We want opportunities. We want jobs. We want innovation. Debt arrears, very few countries in Africa are actually in liquidity or even insolvency crisis. And those countries, we know them, and they're doing what they can to make sure they avoid default. But for the bulk of the countries, it's all about growth, and financing this growth. And so, not giving it with the left hand to take out the opportunity with the right hand is not something that we should see in 2021. And for that, we need strong voices from the business, from the public, from the civil society organization, and from government to make sure people understand, what could actually also work for, to include the African continent in the recovery.
Thank you very much. It's very important to actually mention, just like you have done, that we want to rebuild, but we want to rebuild better. It is, at the end of the day, about Africa rising up again, but especially for Africa to keep standing up. And like you've mentioned, it's very important to clear away from some bad patterns where we enter this debt cycle. So thank you very much for that. Mr. Lopez, this really brings us at the heart of the topic. We need money to rebuild, but where are we going to find this money? We've spoken earlier on about the fact that Africa just doesn't have the same capacity as Europe or indeed China, for instance, to print its own money. So where do we start to rebuild?
Well, I think because we don't have that latitude in terms of monetary policy, there are some restrictions, but be as it may, Africa can really find a lot of savings that are not properly used. I'm just going to give an extreme example. The largest company in the continent, Naspers, based where I am in Cape Town, South Africa, has been allowed by the regulators in South Africa to export, or through delisting of one of its branches, the one that has 31% of the ownership of Tencent, the largest tech company in China. And very few people would believe that the largest shareholder of the largest company in China is an African company. So they have delisted and from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and sent $120 billion to Amsterdam Stock Exchange. So there are lots of examples like this, not as extreme. The estimate is that this year alone, about $30 billion have already left the continent legally. And we know from the last round of studies by UNCTAD that about 80 billion go through illicit financial flows. What this translates into is basically very poor regulation, very poor tax policy. And therefore, the moment you really put your finger into this, you already have a lot of money. and much more than all these discussions about, for instance, the G20 package on debt moratoriums. It's basically about $5 billion so far. That's what it translates to. So it's really ridiculous. So we need to shift the discussion. And when we shift the discussion, then we'll discover that pension funds, commercial banks themselves, have lots of capital that they are not using properly. And we need to really look into the capacities for investing with domestic resources first. And then, the external dimensions will become even more interested in Africa, because they will see that there is movement, that there is dynamics. And we know from all the literature that most of the growth that has happened over the last 20 years in Africa was propelled by internal consumption. So we really have a job to do to convince the leaders that they have to look into their possibilities differently. Then you have a certain number of central banks that still have a bit of latitude, like for instance the CFA Frank Zone Bank for West Africa can actually very easily do a stimulus package much more stronger than they have, timidly tried so far. You have a certain number of countries in North Africa that can do the same. And we have very interesting examples like Kenya trying to buy back some of its external debt and transforming it into internal debt, because, that will not be exposed to the currency fluctuations that have been penalizing Africa quite significantly. So that's the type of measures that are going to be put in place in order to create the latitude that will allow for a recovery. I don't believe it's going to come from external help, although the IMF has done quite a significant support package for Africa. I think right now we are about $23 billion from the IMF. You don't see anything close to that coming from other financial institutions in the multilateral world. Everybody's promising, but basically they are reprogramming what was already allocated for the coming years for Africa. There is nothing really additional, except for the IMF. All the others are just, playing with numbers, but it's not significant. So it has to be an internal effort.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lopez. I actually really appreciate how you gave us a reading region by region, almost country by country. Actually, I really appreciate how both of you since the beginning have reassessed how Africa is not just one country. Each region has its own trends, its own dynamics, so I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Mr. Subran, before concluding, I would like to ask you, how can we work with the insurance sector to achieve this goal of building better and stronger?
The insurance sector, the under insurance in Africa is still, for me, it's a world of opportunities. There is such an insurance gap in Africa today, be it in, property and casualty insurance, in commercial insurance, in life insurance, in saving solutions. So for us, it's, Allianz announced that we are going strong in East Africa. We're very proud of that, after having a very strong footprint in West and Central Africa and in South Africa. For us, it's very natural that the consumer, the user in Africa is in demand of very sophisticated and products and solutions and services that help them bridge the gap, bridge sickness, unemployment, old age. So anything that is about the private pillar of social protection, but also everything that is about events in life. Your car breaks down, someone gets sick, and so forth. So for me, it's clear. In credit insurance, which is, you mentioned, Hamis, we did a calculation, before COVID, that most companies in Africa are asked to pay their suppliers in advance. 75% of African companies are asked to pay the suppliers in advance. In Germany, most suppliers are paid by the clients at 30, 40, 50 days. If you just unleash working capital, so this, suppliers credit, the invisible bank, if you were just to be more transparent with financial statements of companies, and that you would allow a little bit for flexibility here. So you unleash, let's say, payment terms from clients to suppliers to 60 days, you unleash the GDP of Tanzania, 40 billion, like that. So it's all about, trying to see the opportunity in adopting some of the practice when it comes to regulation, supervision of the insurance sector to let a little bit this sector grow, because it has been a bit constrained for quite some time. And I think, Carlos mentioned it, the recovery is also about cost neutral background or backdrop reforms, changing the mindset, but also changing the environment in which companies can operate so that they can innovate, so that they can offer products and they can concur. When I was listening to Carlos, I was thinking about the CFAs of West Africa. Most banks don't lend enough compared to the deposits. The credit crunch in the CFA zone is major, is massive, to maintain the peg to the euro. And that's why there's been this strong discussion about depegging the CFA franc and the ECO and so forth. It's because there is not enough lending. Or when you want to find lending, you go to banks that have a strong and deep balance sheet, which are public banks. There is a world to build there. And I think that's going to be very important to build these blocks. And clearly, the insurance sector is one of these blocks, and we as Allianz will be very happy to contribute for sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Subran. We've come to the end of a very interesting and passionate discussion. But before we leave, I would like to ask you if you have 3 keywords for us to take away from this discussion, which would they be? And I'll start with you, Mr. Lopez. Which 3 words would you like us to remember talking about 2021?
First is resilience. We have to make sure that we become more resilient. The second word that I would suggest we should remember is that systemic. The word captures a lot of angles, but it's basically we experience a systemic disruption, but we need also systemic solutions. And finally, the third word that I will throw, because it's Africa specific, is how we promote our free trade area, because it's going to be the most ambitious regional integration ever in the continent.
Thank you very much. And indeed, the predictions for these zones are fascinating, and we look forward to that. Thank you. And Mr. Subran, what are your 3 keywords?
It's a tough one. I think for me, I think, human-centric, or, the human-centric economy should be really part of this recovery. Of course, manufacturing and commodities, it's all important, but there is something happening on the service side. It's a service crisis. So the human side, especially for the youth, for the African youth, it's very important. Audacity. I think, Africa needs strong leaders to advocate for what works for Africa, because everybody is doing it. Everybody is a bit inspired by China to do a bit more state capitalism. You see public sector tampering with everything. So Africa shouldn't try to be the best student in the class, because everybody is doing exactly the opposite, So that's, be bold. And the third thing is maybe about, innovation. I really, I dream of a world where Africa becomes, just thinking about Kenya and M-Pesa today, having this transfer of payment. Of course, everybody talks about M-Pesa all the time, but, I think it's very important that we keep in mind these examples, because these role models do matter. We need, for building the new world, Africa has the advantage of becoming a laboratory for a lot. And so we, I dream of a world where, Africa becomes a center of competence and excellence for care robots, for robots that actually are built there to support people in doing the tasks. I dream of a world where, we could actually have innovation in the healthcare sector coming from Africa, because, of the natural resources, the energy production, and all of the things that actually do matter a lot for healthcare. But for that, we need so much to happen on the standards. But I think it is very important that innovation is at the center, and that we don't put innovation policy on the backdrop. We need to put it at the center now, because this is what yields to growth in the end, not just, playing a little bit with $1 here, $1 there.
Thank you very much to both of you. I heard somewhere that digitalization wasn't born in Africa, but Africa has become its home. So thank you very much. Thank you also for pinpointing the fact that Africa ultimately will have to find its own patterns, its own solutions, without copying from anywhere else. Obrigada, Mr. Lopez. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Ludovic Soubran. Thank you both. We now have come to the final part of this ceremony, and one I know many of us have been waiting for, the award for the CEO of the Year. This is a special award for a CEO who has made an outstanding contribution in the last 12 months to the advancement of his company and the insurance industry. The winner of this award is someone who has shown exceptional leadership, demonstrated by strategic vision and execution, and/or a successful merger or acquisition. The winner will have contributed to the progress of the industry from wider engagements with key stakeholders, including regulators and policymakers. Before unveiling the winner, let's see who made it to the list of nominees. Congratulations, Mr. Ala Mohamed Ali El Zoheri from Gig Insurance Egypt. Mr. Bertrand Casterez was with us earlier from MUA Limited. Mr. Nasser Saïs, CEO of La Société Nationale d'Assurance. Mr. Stephen Adekunle Alangbo from ARM Life PLC. And Mr. Valentine Ojuma, CEO of FBN Insurance. And now, let us all discover the CEO of the Year. Congratulations, Mr. Valentine Ojuma, CEO of FBN Insurance Nigeria. Thank you for your tireless work and for what you have achieved as recognized by our judges. Let's hear a few words from our 2020 CEO of the Year.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I received this award. I am grateful to the organizers that despite the challenges of the pandemic, the annual award ceremonies could still go on. I want to congratulate the board, management and staff of FBN Insurance for the great work they have been doing to bring this company to its current state. I wish to dedicate this award to all those who have been working tirelessly to find lasting solutions to the health challenges brought about by the pandemic. I believe and hope that their efforts will bring an end to the pandemic soon. The insurance industry has been brought to the fore again due to the losses arising from the effects of the pandemic. There has been challenges in various jurisdictions over whether or not these losses should be covered by the insurance industry. I believe that the insurance industry will come out stronger at the end of the day. In closing, let me thank the board and management of Africa Reinsurance Corporation for their continued sponsorship of this event. Thank you all and God bless.
Congratulations again to you, Mr. Ojuma, and to the whole FBN Insurances team. Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, our 2020 edition of the African Insurance Awards has almost come to an end. But before our final performance tonight, that you won't want to miss, believe me, I'd like to welcome back Dr. Karikedzi, who would like to say a few words of thanks to the nominees, winners, and to all of you watching us today. Dr. Karikedzi.
On behalf of Africa Re Board of Directors, management and staff, I would like to extend my sincere congratulations to all the winners of the 6th edition of the African Insurance Awards. I also congratulate all the nominees in the 4 categories of awards for their outstanding work and achievement in the year under review. To all the winners, the Insurance CEO of the Year, Mr. Valentine Ojuma, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of FBN Insurance from Nigeria, the Insurance Best Performing Company of the Year, Mauritius Union Assurance Company Limited, or MUA Limited, from Mauritius, the Insurance Innovation Company of the Year, Alpha Direct Insurance Company from Botswana, the InsurTech Company of the Year, Pula from Kenya. To all these proud winners of the 2020 African Insurance Awards, who will get each a cash prize of US dollars $25,000. As CEO and organizations, your contributions in the areas of innovation, corporate financial performance, and technology application to the insurance industry are greatly appreciated. Your dedication, determination, and innovative spirit are setting new trends and standards, and equally showing us how to succeed in the face of adversity. You have made all of us in the insurance industry proud and even more determined to achieve greater success and to serve our customers and communities to manage better the risks they face. Permit me to express sincere appreciation to the panel of judges, renowned industry experts and captains of the industry, who took time from their busy schedules to scrutinize all the entries and select the winners of this year. Africa Re will continue to be a dedicated partner and will go the extra mile to support and reward outstanding efforts to help develop the entire African insurance industry. This is the mission we received from our founding fathers to foster the development of the insurance industry in Africa. This mission is at the center of everything we do. Once again, congratulations to the winners and my gratitude to all the participants to this award and today's event. In advance, I wish you all a very happy, successful, and healthier year 2021. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much for your wishes, Dr. Karikedzi. As we say goodbye to you all, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and also on behalf of Africa Re, I wish you a wonderful end of the year and hope that 2021 will bring you much happiness and success. So, as we say goodbye, let me invite Magic System from Côte d'Ivoire, who are going to put a lot of magic in the air. And yes, you're allowed to dance with them, like me. Thank you all for watching the ceremony, and we hope to see you next year.
Feel the magic in the air. Feel the magic in the air.
Magic System, Red One, Shaoki. Comme d'habitude on est calé, comme toujours ça va aller. On te met l'ambiance à gogo, tous ensemble on fait le show.
On t'invite à la magie, y a pas de raccourci. Oublie tes soucis, c'est bien faire la folie.
On t'invite à la magie, y a pas de raccourci. Oublie tes soucis. Oh, 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 oh. c'est pas seulement pour les bobos. Nous on vient d'un nous mambo. Mon ami, si tu as le niveau, rejoins-nous pour t'enjailler.
On t'invite à la magie, y a pas de raccourci. Oublie tes soucis et viens faire la folie.
On t'invite à la magie, y a pas de raccourci. Oublie tes soucis. Oh, 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 oh. Magic System. Toujours nous. Ah, ça change pas. Ah ouais. Ah, Shawky avec Red One. Est-ce que ça marche? Ça va pas. On vient du ghetto pour aller plus haut. Avec les magiciens, c'est le wedding. On vient du ghetto pour aller plus haut. Avec les magiciens. Oh, oh, oh.
Bonne année, 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 bonne année. Salut, c'est le groupe Magic System. Juste un petit acapella pour souhaiter nos vœux les meilleurs à tous les organisateurs d'Africaré et leurs partenaires. Nous savons que vous jouez un rôle très important. C'est pourquoi nous vous souhaitons une année 2021 pleine de santé et de prospérité. Comme on le dit chez nous, c'est ça qui est la vérité.
Despite the excellent performance of 2019, the COVID-19 pandemic cast a dark shadow on the prospects of Africa Re and the survival of the African insurance industry in 2020. However, in the midst of the crisis and disruption caused by the pandemic, Africa Re availed itself of its robustness, preparedness and resilience to reward its faithful shareholders with the highest ever dividend rate of $8.8 per subscribed and paid up share. Seamlessly implement its business continuity plan to continue serving its customers during lockdown. Successfully adopt and roll out a very effective work from home policy, thereby enabling staff to remain safe and sound while supporting African governments to combat the pandemic. Achieve a very decent performance during the first half of 2020 with a much improved underwriting result and net profit. Keep adapting, learning, innovating, leading and sowing seeds of a better future for the industry. This year, in 2020, Africa Re was able to maintain its financial rating at A- with an excellent stable outlook by S&P for the 10th consecutive year. Continue the training of up to 1,000 future insurance professionals through the Young Insurance Professionals program. Remotely train its customers, insurance companies, brokers and risk managers in various insurance and reinsurance skills and competencies necessary to build the human capacity of the insurance industry. Engage with African regulatory authorities to carry out various initiatives such as mortality tables to improve the underwriting of life insurance policies, a new IT application to improve the industry statistics and transparency. Organize the 2020 African Insurance Awards to celebrate excellence, performance and innovation in the African insurance industry. offer a tremendous support of $3.3 million to the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic in Africa. The beneficiaries include Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the World Health Organization, major African cities hosting our 8 regional offices, and the 41 national insurance associations of Africa Re member countries. We were also able to obtain the re-licensing of its South African subsidiary by the Prudential Authority in June 2020 under the new South African Insurance Act. Launched the Africa Re Underwriting Agency Limited in the Dubai International Finance Center in August 2020. Continue the preparation for life operations in the South African market, beside the non-life operations established since 1995. Improve its ranking to 41st in the top 50 global reinsurance companies of the AM Best rating agency. In Africa Re, we don't hesitate in a crisis. We remain professional, show sympathy, and demonstrate empathy towards all of our stakeholders. During a crisis, our DNA does not change. It takes us through the crisis. We still learn, care, lead, and win.